when we see each other is expanding our outlook to include not just BIPOC, queer, trans, non-binary musicians, but also to discussing work by BIPOC, queer, trans, non-binary authors. So I invited a couple of my friends I know from writing workshops for BIPOC poets organized by Kavi Kanam to join me. In this episode, I'm joined with Christopher Silverberg and Iman King Carter, and we will be discussing the young adult novel Bitter by the Nigerian non-binary author Akwaeke Emezi. Hey Chris, hey Iman, how are you all doing today?
Hey Nikki, it's great to see you today.
Hi, how's it going?
Yeah, how is everyone doing? Like seriously, during this time, I wanted to create space for that because it's just like so dystopian, and every day is something new and something just terrible, honestly. And I just wanted to, check in with everyone, see how everyone is doing. And then also to ask this question, like I've been asking not only myself this question, but also asking my friends, strangers even, like, how are you practicing hope if you are practicing hope?
I don't know that I have a practice of hope in particular, but, I'm surviving. Uh, the other day I accidentally left my phone at home, and so I couldn't keep track of what was happening. And what happened that day wasn't any better or worse than what happened every other day. It was equally horrendous. So I guess I'm not practicing hope, but I am practicing being intentional about how I engage with, um, you know, everything with the fall of America. I'm joking? Question mark? Maybe.
I don't know if that's a question mark, I feel like, oh my God, like that's me every day.
And I guess the other thing that brings me hope is like Black people in America have been through much more lawless times. There's a president that doesn't care about the law, but we lived through centuries of everyone didn't care about the law, or literally the law formally did not apply to us. Yeah, and which is not really hopeful because it's also like a lot of people had a really, suffered and died under that. But it's hope for survival. And I guess maybe the only actual hope is that like in moments of chaos are also to create the potential for moments of transformation. It's possible to create from this period of chaos. It is truly entirely possible that the opportunity for more fundamental reform or reconstruction emerges.
No, I hear you on that, on all of those things. And I think for the most part, what you brought up too kind of relates to the book that we're discussing today. But Iman, how have you been practicing hope, if you have been practicing hope at all?
I don't know if I was intentionally doing it, but I realize now that I've really just been turning to art. So I have been in museums and surrounding myself with poets. Like I would say this right now is a part of that. Surrounding myself with artists. Also reading this book is a part of that. Because like you said, it's feeling like very dystopian times. And I dare to say that this book was very futuristic. So that gave me hope. I mean, I've been watching a lot of shows that are more sci-fi, futuristic, just kind of like, I need some hope. I need something else. I know what's going on, even if I'm not completely plugged in. I know what's happening out there, but I need to figure out what happens after and how do I get through this. That's what it's looked like for me.
Yes, you brought up a really good point. Like, and I don't want to go too deep into this, but I have to respond to like both what you and Chris had said. Figuring out what happens next, and that's like seriously huge. That's one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot, and I feel like that's something that no one, well, I don't want to say no one, but I haven't found any sort of like guidance in that area. You know what I mean? In terms of like, well, this is how we're going to basically, you know, how we're going to change things in the future. And I guess it's kind of like that's really hard for someone to imagine. But I mean, we have so many artists. So, so I mean, like, uh, there's gotta be someone out there who's, like, imagined something else and has, like, some kind of, alternative world o view or something to say, "Here is how we implement it." I guess maybe that's too, like, utopian in a sense because it's just, like, you need some kind of policy changes, you need, like, the boring stuff, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. You need, like, actual policies, you need, like, actual laws that are going to change the direction that we're in right now, and that just kinda goes back to what you're saying too, Chris, about intentionality. Like, I feel like, yes, we need the boring stuff of the policies and all of the laws and all of that stuff, but we also need as well, intentional living, personally, like, on the level of, like, our personal lives, like, intentionally living our personal lives, like, intentionally reaching out to our neighbors and building community through that process. Um, so yeah. But long story short, I totally agree. Um, so yeah, and I also want to just thank you guys again for joining me again to join me on this journey on the podcast. And I wanted to say also that I wanted to know also, like our book for today is Bitter by Akwaeke Emezi, and I just wanted to know like, what did you all think about Bitter? Like, what was your response? Like, what are some of the things that really stood out for you all?
Yeah, can I give y'all a hot take? My hot take was for like the first like 2/3 of the book, I did not like it as much as I like Pet. I was like, I don't it felt more explicit. Not in terms of like what was happening or the content or anything, but like Pet was like, what do we do about violence and how do we respond with or without violence to violent people and stuff, and it just felt very like murky middle the whole way through, but in a way that I liked. It was like, oh, uncertain, which way do we go? Whereas Bitter felt more like, well, for the first third, it was like, this is a disaster. Go, somebody do something, kill the monsters. And then for the second third, it was like, oh, wait, the monster killers are not great either. Stop the angels. Um, but like what I'm convincing myself of, like even now, is that like that is much more representative of life in an emergency, as opposed to like Pet is supposed to be about how do you deal with the problems that no one wants to see after the revolution, so to speak. But like Bitter is mid-revolution. I think maybe mid-revolution, it is much more like, oh, we should definitely do this. No, we should definitely do that. It's much more like switching hard between different directions, as opposed to like, what is the nuanced consideration? And also, another thing that the book really gets into is like the creature that comes through in Bitter is so is so different in intention than the creature that comes through in Pet, and so that also shapes. But that's also what comes out of the environment that they're in Bitter. It's a much worse environment, so the intentions and the energy is much more harsh than in Pet. Yeah, okay, that's my hot take about the book.
Yeah, no, I totally hear you on that. But before I get into it, I wanted to hear what you had to say, Iman, about how you felt about the book. What were some of the things that really stood out to you?
Yeah, I really appreciated, Bitter. I guess I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum than Chris. Um, I really appreciated that Bitter came after Pet, because I think and it's also just the type of person I am. I was really interested in the relationships, in Pet. So I'm a lover, so I was instantly interested in Aloe and Bitter's relationship. So having this like teasing out was really cool for me to like see how they got to that point because I remember that being a thought for me during Pet. Like, this is a really beautiful glimpse of a relationship. I'd love to know how they got there. So it was really cool to see the transformation of that relationship and also to see all these other small relationships that were happening within Bitter that didn't happen as much in Pet, um, just because it's just the nature of the book. There were some really beautiful friendships in Pet and relationships. But yeah, I really enjoyed Bitter. I thought it was a really cool sequel. That it's like the sequel that was coming before. Uh, and yeah, I think what stood out to me most was Bitter's resistance to the revolution. Um, and I could also like I felt for that. I've definitely felt that in the past, and even at times now. So it was really cool to see how that shaped throughout the book, and like starting from Bitter having no interest in revolution, and then being smack dab in the middle of it in the turning point. So I thought this was a really cool book. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
I totally hear you on that, Aman. And I totally hear you too, Chris, in terms of like, how you feel about it really for me at least, I felt like this was more of an explanation. Bitter was an explanation for why wasn't Bitter, open about the monsters, about the angels, why she was so hesitant about explaining what that was. It made sense now. Like I didn't understand like why they were so afraid of expressing this. Why were they so because we didn't get that urgency of Pet being like so like gun well, Pet was gun ho about like, yes, let's kill all the monsters, but it wasn't as urgent. Like, basically what you said, Chris, around like, the urgency is totally different in each of these books. And so yeah, I can hear your I guess I want to say your frustration with Bitter. I want to say a little bit, maybe. But I also like I really appreciate exactly what you said, Iman, in terms of like the relationships. Like you actually see the sense of community building, like the actual building of community in Bitter, and how this is really important, a part that an important part of the revolution, essentially, and why it is important. Like we see through Bitter that this is essential in order to overcome these things. And especially for folks who don't necessarily believe in the revolution and don't want to be a part of it, like you see it through Bitter's friends, her best friend, Blessing. And I love that name, by the way, Blessing. Oh my God. Like seriously, dude. If you name a kid Blessing, that's man. Yeah, anyway, I'm getting off topic. But yeah, so like I mean to see the care that they provided their friend who they know who is not ready to face something as like the front lines, like that's really huge. That's something that not everyone is capable of handling and doing, so So yeah, so those are some of my things that I really enjoyed. And I also love the relationship, Aloe and Bitter's relationship. I just loved Aloe in Bitter. Like seeing I mean, I want to say that maybe Aloe was a really kind of like a little bit naive, I want to say, maybe naive in a sense. Like, how do you all feel about Aloe in those terms? Amon, I see you're shaking your head. Go for it.
Yeah, I think that's valid. There was definitely some naivete, and I think we towards the end realize Aloe realizes that. But yeah, I think Aloe was definitely a little naive to what was really going on, the cost of the revolution, and even really his own feelings in some ways.
Chris, I noticed you nodded your head as well. Did you have something to say about that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't have much more to say, but I agree. What was I? And also connects to why in Penn he was so like not down for like he just want to stay as far away from the angel stuff as possible. And I think it maybe connects to how the events of Bitter put his innocence at risk. And he was supposed to, he's kind of like a open-hearted character. So I get why going through something like this would be threatening for him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, you know what I like about I liked about Aloe? In the first book, they definitely gave like queer for queer energy, and I'm glad that was confirmed. Great
Yes.
job, Ben.
Yes. Oh my god, yes. I was just like, "Wait a minute. But hold on. Really? Am I is my queerdar just off right now? Is something going on that I am not seeing?" So yes, thank you. Like seriously, I thought the same. But yeah, that was amazing that I was brought up to. Like I really appreciated that as well. Um, the other thing that came up too, uh, for me at least, what resurfaced for me, it still made me question if the angels were really angels in a sense. Um, it brought me back to the whole binary around innocence, good and bad, and can angels be bad? Um, and can angels be a monster? Um, I mean, especially with vengeance, like seriously, when thinking about vengeance itself, like vengeance gave itself the name vengeance. Well, I mean, based on what bitter was going through. But then you have to think about, well, not to give away too much about the book, but then you have to think about, well, she has monster blood in her. So obviously, so yeah, so it's just kind of like, well, then what is an angel then? Redefining that. I mean, how did you all feel about that? Aman, I saw you raised your hand.
Yeah, I think what you said about like what is an angel. I was raised in an old Black Baptist church, and this is kind of something that I've thought about for, I guess, my whole life. With that being my grounding and foundation. And one thing that was always told to us was the devil is an angel too. So this idea that like angels have always just been an entity, and there isn't a binary, so to say, with that of like, yeah, an angel is good and a demon is bad. That like those can be the same thing. That it's just they're all parts of this spirit realm. Um, yeah, so I think yeah, the angel is really just this entity that comes from another realm. Um, and if an angel says they're an angel, I don't know if you can tell them otherwise.
I don't think you want to tell them otherwise, honestly, because they're an angel saying, "Hey, I'm an angel." Chris, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, same. I also grew up very, very, very Christian, and so that's such a good point that at least in the Black tradition, you do grow up with right, like the devil is an angel too, and um, the idea that things that are actually very bad can appear the same or similar to things that seem like they would be powerful in a good way. I'm still like I wish there was another book. I'm so curious about the whole like give us a book set on the other side. What's going on the other side? Like
Oh my god.
are they with each other? But no, you hit, you hit.
No, no, you go, you go, you go.
Well, I was just like that. I was like, what? Like, does everyone get along over there? Are they like all on the same page? Because it seemed like there was it seemed like, some characters were very much on the hunt, and other characters were not. But it's like, is that just because of like their interactions with humans? But like Pet seems very different than Vengeance. And so it also like put me in a mindset of in a Christian framework, you think there's two camps. There's team God angels and there's team devil angel. And all the devil angels have the same bad plan and all the God angels have the same good plan, which is God's plan. But like this gives much more, it I am not knowledgeable at all, truthfully, about African spiritualities, any African spiritualities, but what little tiny bit I know about Orishas, it gave me more of that energy. It gave me more, these are different principles that can move in different ways, and it's not they're all on the same page. And actually every angel on the other side was like, burn, burn, burn. It's like, no, you called through the burn, burn, burn angels because you were in a burn, burn, burn place. That makes sense.
Yes. Oh my god, and I'm so glad that you brought up all of those things. Like, seriously, Chris. Like, honestly, like, I wondered, like, well, what was the other side like? Yes, and I also wanted a book that would discuss the other side and what does that look like, especially in terms of Miss Virtue. Like, she's the fallen angel, and she basically just did not do what she was supposed to do, right? Which was to man the gates, make sure that the gates were complying, and she did not choose to do that. And so oh my god. And also, but I'm just gonna say this, but Miss Virtue is gangster. She's total gangster. She's like total gangster. No, I swear to God, she is total gangster. I was just like, when I was reading about her, I was just like, oh my god. Anyway, but yes, and then also what you brought up in terms of African spirituality. Yeah, I think that even has a place in it. And I also do not have any knowledge about African spirituality in those terms. But now I feel like I need to investigate this further and look into this because there's definitely I mean, it is mentioned in the book as well when, when they were on the shutdown, the seclusion, and they were meeting. I forgot her name, Miss I Bin. I forgot her name.
Bill Fina,
Bill,
I think.
yes, yes. And she was just basically explaining to Bitter and the whole crew that, they depend on African spirituality. It wasn't explicitly said like that, but they depend on African spirituality for protection. And even Sunflower was an example of that African spirituality, which, by the way, I felt like the description of Sunflower was I thought about it in terms of like, so Sunflower is just kind of like what people would, on the outside would say, oh, that's an AI being, when in fact, so it brings up into, it kind of goes with what you were saying, Iman, in terms of it being futuristic and understanding that maybe African spirituality is futuristic and is beyond AI. I dare to say that. I might stand by it. So, um, so yeah, how do y'all feel about that?
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, this whole thing kind of felt like there was a lot of, I think they said they called it like spirit work going on. Just this whole idea of like that there has to be blood and there's sacrifice. So yeah, this idea of just we're working within different realms and different rules, like you both were saying, and that it's out of this world and futuristic. Yeah, I thought this was really cool, and I wonder how much of the author's background as a Nigerian really plays into it. Um, Again, like you guys, I really need to get more tapped in because I cannot speak too much about a lot of African spirituality. But just of the spirit work that I know from being a Southern Black folk, I definitely felt a lot of that through this book, which I appreciated.
Chris?
I did just want to say, yeah, Nikki, you're right. Like the African practices that have been going on for centuries are in fact the future. And the future is a lot of different things that we left behind. Sankofa. Go back and get it. You know what I'm saying? That's where I was reading about that the other day. That's one of the things that I like grew up with. The kind of things you grow up with as like sort of general. I feel, especially like Black Americans trying to discover what parts of their African roots are useful or they're able to bring into the present. Um, Sankofa was always one of those things that I heard all the time, and I finally looked it up, and I was like, "Oh, that makes a lot of sense." Because it's just there's the things that you left behind when you made this transition, but it's good to go back and retrieve it. And I think there's a lot that we will need to go back and retrieve in the next however many frightening years, decades, time. Lots of old ways of being that maybe need to come back. Also, the other thing that I want to say, and it's so horrible, like white supremacy. Like I know plenty about Greek mythology. I don't know really shit about like Eve. I don't know very much about Orishas and Yoruba besides what Beyonce taught me. I'm joking. Beyonce taught me more than my teachers did. How about that? Um, Beyonce and Wikipedia. But um, Miss Virtue specifically also reminded me very much of Prometheus, like in terms of Greek myth, in terms of like the person from the heavens that came down and just like fell in love with the mortals and broke all the rules to be nice to us. And like, thanks, appreciate that.
Yes, yes, I totally agree with you. And the other thing that I recognize too within myself, um, and I think I can say this for most of us who basically come from a history of our ancestors being transported through the transatlantic. Um, yes, maybe I don't think we lost any of the things that was taken from us. I think it's just us not seeing it in ourselves. You know what I mean? And I think it's you. I think that's another thing that we intentionally need to do. And not to bring up the Super Bowl, but I feel like that also can be can be related to the Super Bowl halftime performance. Um, I mean, definitely, uh, Kendrick was speaking to Black people, and he was speaking to us, and I feel like that in itself is a connection to us communicating with each other, not just in the present, but in the future and also in the past, and like in the spirit world and in, you know, this world as well. Not to be all woo woo, but I just needed to say that. Okay. All right. So the other thing that I thought was really interesting was, I really need a eucalyptus space in my life. I don't know how you all feel about that. How do you all feel about having a eucalyptus space in our lives? It's like, I mean, that it was just beautiful. I just felt like that was so. I know it's very utopian, but and it is utopian for Bitter. Like, it was a safe space for her, and it was a necessary space for her to basically slow down all of the trauma that she experienced in the past, and then also kind of build community. Having that stop, having the whole trauma that she experienced stop, and having the space to actually recognize herself and to basically build from there. I felt like that was so necessary. And I felt like that was pivotal, for not just the story in itself, but just all our stories in general. That we need spaces like that ourselves in order to really heal and to move on. I don't know how you all feel about that.
Yeah, reading this and getting the general vibe about eucalyptus definitely made me think about places that have felt like eucalyptus to me. And I am privileged that I was able to go to a boarding school in high school, which kind of gave me those vibes in a way when we ignore the fact that it was a predominantly white institution. But like it did a lot of the things, you know? Um, but it's funny hearing you, Nikki, say that eucalyptus feels utopian because, dare I say, that we all met in a eucalyptus. Cave Canem has been exactly that for me. We were even just talking about how even an upcoming workshop is going to do exactly that and help us with memory and rememory. So I think it's not utopian. There are so many places we may not be able to live there in those spaces, but spaces like that, like Cave Canem, we've kind of grown them and we've brought that even into here, into your podcast, which really appreciate you inviting into us into. But yeah, I don't think it's utopian. It's just a matter of finding and maintaining those spaces because they are here and they've been here. Because the people before us, like we've talked about, there were people before us that already set these up, and will set up more. But yeah, they're here.
Yes, yes, and I stand corrected so beautifully. Oh my god, thank you, Iman. Like, seriously, that is so true, Kavikanam. I mean, like, seriously, like, I am still processing the workshops that I've been a part of, and it's gonna be a year, and I'm still processing in a very good way, in a very positive way, in a way of, like, an upliftment and just, like, seeing things so differently in such a mindful and I don't know, I don't even have the correct words to describe what I have, like, how blessed I've felt after being a part of this group. Oh my god, that is so true. But anyway, yes, definitely not utopian. It is it does exist. It does exist. Chris, did you have something to say?
I've really been sitting here like meditating on this because like I need to like think about this for a while about because okay, so when you were talking about eucalyptus, like part of me was like, I don't know what I would do in a space like that. And you point out, Iman, like we literally met in a space like that, right? In many ways. And I was just like, what what would that space be? Like if as an actual living space, like what would it be to live in that space? And then also like I feel like I wouldn't feel comfortable there. Like I feel like I mean that's probably like unhealthy in some ways. Like, oh no, I want to be around dysfunctional things. Which I don't question mark. Um, but I really have to think about like what would it be like to right to be in a space where you feel absolutely safe, but in community, you know? Uh, yeah. So, I mean, when I have health insurance and money, that's going to be a great thing to process with a therapist. Uh, I'm joking. I have health insurance for now. Yay. But that's that. So basically, my answer to what did you think about was about my life and how I need uh to work through some things. That's my answer.
Well, hey, I mean, I think that's in itself is allowed at Eucalyptus, just based on the fact that I keep remembering what Miss Virtue said to Bitter, recognizing that she needed to hear this. You have a home here forever. This is your home forever, no matter what. Um, and she meant it, and you know, and I feel like that's the thing. That's the thing. You yes, maybe, and the thing is too, like Bitter didn't know how to act in that space when she first got there. She mentioned that, she said she did not know how to be because she's never been in that sort of space before. And the thing is, it wasn't like, they said to her, well, you need to change and be like this, that, the other in order to be a part of the Eucalyptus. No, they just let her be and let her come into her own at whatever time that will be. And I think that that in itself that's just amazing, man. You know what I mean? That's just yeah, now I'm gonna cry. It's just I'm gonna start crying now. But anyway, okay, so, the other thing that I wanted to bring up too as well, I feel like we need to really discuss Miss Virtue because I feel she is super important here, and I can go on, but I wanna hear what you all thought about Miss Virtue.
One thing I thought was really interesting was that like Miss Virtue betrays them in a way by withholding information, which is a little bit also reminds me of Pet, you know, of the whole like actually someone that has behaved very lovingly, but they didn't give you all the information. And like they led you down the path that they thought was best and that really probably was best for you, but they didn't give you all the reasons why, um, and how that can harm a relationship even with the very best of intentions. That was really my first takeaway from Miss Virtue. Um, but it was yeah, it was also very another moment that I really loved was when it looks like, Miss Virtue and Vengeance are going to get into a conflict and they point out that like ultimately, regardless of who wins, it's gonna harm all the people nearby. You know, it everything reminded me of something else. It reminded me of the anime Attack on Titan. It's like if no matter how who's good and who's bad, if the two things are big enough, their conflict will screw things up for people on the ground. Even if one is completely right and one is completely wrong. Um, and so that was really interesting to me about like no matter how righteous Miss Virtue was, it 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 would not have been the best thing for everybody for her to like defeat the bad guy with her powers. They had to find another way to de-escalate. Truthfully, so I thought that was interesting.
I think what stood out to me most with Miss Virtue was just this idea of Miss Virtue being this color gray following Miss Virtue around. So being this kind of just like gray area that everyone kind of felt safe with, but wasn't too sure. Um, and had all this power that also made them kind of feel safe, but kind of scared. Um, so I thought that was really cool how even that gray kind of changed throughout the book, like to this like deathly steel. Um, but yeah, this idea of like that there aren't any true like binaries. There's just all this gray area that we mess around in. Um, but I really enjoyed Miss Virtue's character as far as like uh Bitter's relationship to Miss Virtue and Miss Virtue being this adult figure that Bitter could turn to and a home, and then that being turned on its head several times, especially as the book is coming to a close. And then at one point we see these two entities uh, related to Bitter that are going at it. This person that was a safe house for her, and then this being that she feels she created and brought here. So I thought that was a really cool, just like the role of Miss Virtue's character with Bitter. Um, and yeah, that moment of realizing who Miss Virtue was a really cool moment. I definitely like gasp. Um, I know, Chris, you mentioned Attack on Titan. I didn't get that far in Attack on Titan for that to be go ahead.
I'm just gonna say neither did I. Again,
Oh,
Wikipedia is
they're
so
just so big.
powerful.
Yeah. But I was gonna say what came up for me is Steven Universe. And the angels really being kind of like the gems. And at first you're like, all gems are good or all gems are bad, and then there's all this gray area, and then Miss Virtue was me to me was a lot like Rose, and this idea of like there really isn't much like good or bad, like who you may think is good may have to do things that you feel are bad, and that's just how things go. And I think that was a really poignant theme throughout Bitter of just like collateral damage, and all the strays that people catch, and all of the things that I think in the book we kind of find have to happen in order for progress. That there's, yeah, people are going to let you down, but we do also get to see what reconciliation looks like. Um, so I thought that was really cool. But yeah. Yeah.
Can I just say real quick, I did not even notice that whole thing about gray. Like, I'm gonna get off this call and steal your idea and write Stone is a gray area. Like, that's a poem to me. Like, steel is a gray area. Like, this is very deep right there.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that too. And yes, the color, yeah, definitely the color. I see it now. Like, I see it so vividly now. It makes a lot of sense. And, and the whole idea of the gray area it's right in front of you. It's right in front of us. It was right in front of us. Oh my God. And then also just thinking about it too, that, our lives are nuance. Our lives are pretty much nuance. And it can't be, there's so much gray area involved, and it can't be pigeonholed into one thing, you know, and so yeah, I mean, I'm still learning that myself. But yeah, so this totally and this also reminded me of too about what we're experiencing presently. And I feel like that to some extent we want things to be in a box. We really want things to be in a box in order to, control, manipulate, and just rule over. And that's that's not going to happen. That's definitely not how what life is about. So yeah, and then also, like, also, this also reminds me once again presently about things that are happening. in terms of like the billionaires in Bitter. Um, and yeah, I don't know. How do y'all feel about what they were saying about the billionaires in Bitter and seeing the clear correlation with our time right now? I want to hear what you guys have to say about this. Who wants to go first? Go for it, Chris.
Just real quick, I don't even remember that man's name because I read Elon Musk every time.
Yes.
Deron, whatever no, it's Elon Musk. He was Elon Musk.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Okay. Yes. All right. Anything else?
Yeah, I think every time I saw the name, I saw a different billionaire's name because we have too many. So that was fun. Um, it's funny. Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to some friends as I've been reading this book because I think another big theme in this book was like everyone has a role in the revolution, and um, if we're talking theoretical, uh, I love the TV series Dexter. And I've always felt that people like Dexter have a role in revolutions. Um, and I wholeheartedly really appreciated how we went about it in Bitter. So this idea that like there are some things that come down to blood and have already like bloodshed has already happened, and it's about, like we said, intentional, concerted, targeted efforts. Um, so and it's not a new idea. This isn't a new thought process. Uh, so yeah, I was completely down with it, and yeah, it was really cool again to read this and remember that like where we are as the readers in this timeline is in the past in this book. So like when they're talking about the old days, it's our now in a lot of ways. Um, so it was kind of also interesting to feel that idea of like, all right, they hadn't even figured it out yet, and this was them figuring that out. Um, but I mean, again, this has already happened. Like medieval times, heads were on stakes. Things got done, and that's that.
Yeah. And it's not they're very clear in the book, it's not beautiful. And we want to operate out of a space of law, like an ordered way of let me even they talk about even in pet they talk about like basically like rehabilitation centers are not the same thing as jails, right? Like which is contested in pet as well, to be clear. Are they the same? Are they not the same? How are they the same? Um it is very interesting how everybody in the book stations themselves relative to violence. And it's like that place of is this what we want? No. Can we move from this place? A, it's the only choice we have, but B, go, like, and yeah, I mean everything relates to current events, but we do have some people that seem as though what they would do is after the angels, gave the medieval treatment to the billionaire, they'd be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry that that happened. We're just like make everything go back normal. Like, here's your mayor back. We're so sorry this happened. Like, what do you do?" Yeah, and, and so, and it was also very interesting to me. I mean, I'm talking about hibiscus. Like, seeing hibiscus in this book was very interesting. And also how Ube like it was very interesting how Ube was like in some ways the most directly affected, but was also the one that was both not down to go down the violent route, but also knew enough to make use of it once it had already happened. And I thought that was really interesting. Actually, we should talk about Ube too, because like that, I think he was my favorite character. I think that was my favorite character in the book, personally.
Yeah, no, I hear you on that. Several things you brought up. So one, going back to current times and how we're dealing with it, and how the book dealt with it. I was reminded, and this may sound pretty naive, it just reminded me, is it really freedom if it comes with a cost? Um, that came up for me like several times when I listened to it. And, and I hear myself sounding like I'm being like I'm, 12 or something. But I was just, I know it's a super high cost, such as, the high cost of it, another person's life, so is it still freedom in that sense, in that way? Um, like I was reminded of what Ubi said, like all freedoms are terrible, you know? So what that, and I feel like that's one of the things that the book was battling with. It's just like, well, do we do we support this, or should we not support this? Or what does this mean? And I feel like that's also part of the reason that they wanted to keep it a secret too, is because of the shame involved in recognizing that yes, I'm capable of this monstrosity, and what does that say about me? Um, so yeah, I feel, yeah, and I totally agree. We should talk about Ubi as well, and also hibiscus as well. Like it makes sense now. Hibiscus makes sense now. Like in Pet, I didn't really see it that much, and maybe I was just so caught up with the name hibiscus. Like as I mentioned, I love hibiscuses. Um, so so yeah, so like yeah, I want to hear what you guys think. Go for it. Iman, you want to go?
Yeah, so first, Ube. I also really appreciated Ube's character, um, and showing this like struggle, and dichotomy of wanting freedom and being a part of Asada, um, and having been so directly affected by the traumas of Mr. Billionaire. Um, it was like you were saying, the struggle throughout this book was just so like poignant of like everyone trying to do the right thing, but they're not necessarily being one right thing or one right way. And it was cool to see someone who were being shown as like a prophet to Asada with Ube, like being like a prophet, and who everyone outside of Asada kind of saw as the head, even though there was no head. Um, one that showing disabled folks are pretty much always on the front lines. That was Snaps because yeah. Um, and yeah, this idea that like even this person that is a prophet is struggling with what is right, is bloodshed right? And then us even seeing Ube as like an angel figure. I thought that was really cool, and I really appreciated Ube's character. Yeah, Hibiscus. Yeah, it was really interesting seeing Hibiscus pull up in this. Sometimes when you're processing things, you just like blank things out and just kind of. I think there was a lot of skimming for me when I saw Hibiscus's name. Sometimes like I'd have to kind of go back. Um, just yeah, with knowing everything. Uh, but like you said, it made things track. Like you said, Nikki, this book felt like an explanation to a lot of things in Pet. and hibiscus was one of those explanations. Um, and yeah, it was just to see reconciliation and talk about reconciliation just going across books now, with hibiscus and us seeing kind of hibiscus young and then getting to where hibiscus gets in pet, and what that looks like. After knowing that hibiscus was there for all of this, it's just like revolution is an ongoing thing. Um, Monsters, and I say that with air quotes, are born every day, you know, and that, yeah, it's really interesting how the end of bitter feels kind of final in a lot of ways of like, yeah, things are getting better, things are going to be better because you know that in pet the world is so different. Um, I don't know. That was, I don't know. I'm still processing. I feel like the ending, um, and the ending being the middle of the story.
Yeah, I agree. It was weird. It was very weird. And it was very, like, how do you it's also, like, facts that we don't know. Do you know what I mean? Like, has Hibiscus done anything, like, by this point when we meet him, you know? Like, is Hibiscus all on the up and up? It there's even, like, some lines, like, one line from Ube that I was trying to pull up on my phone that I couldn't find, but this almost, like, was this foreshadowing? Like, does Ube know something about Hibiscus? So, and that was, and even just thinking, you know, like psychologically, I wonder if some of the intensity of Hibiscus fire against all the other monsters is like knowing on some level that there's a monstrous part of himself that he wants to externalize. Um, and that was really interesting. But it's really to the point that you made about disabled people always on the front lines, but like especially I think that the only moment that vengeance changed its mind at all in any way was that confrontation with Ube where he was like, I am already whole. Um, and it was very, I really love that because it was, um, I mean, vengeance didn't stop for anything, but like at least vengeance accepted, like, I am already whole. And was like, oh, okay, I see. You have, you're not thinking about this the same way that I do, but you mean it, you know? It's not like, oh, you're just saying that. No, like what the reality that I put on you is not the only reality. And I thought that was powerful and just what an interesting, I don't know, what an interesting character, what an interesting um rendering of that trope, which, you know, it can go into a stereotypical direction of somebody that's disabled, but they're like the wisest among us. But like to me, not being a currently disabled person, like it did feel real and not tokenizing. Although I'd be curious what somebody else thought.
No, it didn't feel like that at all for me. And maybe maybe I just don't know because I don't really, well, you know, I I'm not disabled. Um, so I wouldn't know what would be tokenism for that person. But for the most part, I felt like it was real. Like I was really moved by Ubi. Um, and I felt his character being necessary in the book, like completely necessary. Um, and so yeah, just to answer your question. Um, So the other thing that I wanted to bring up, which is kind of a little depressing, so, but just going back to the whole freedom thing that we were discussing and how it has its costs. Um, the whole battle with that, 2 things that I wanna bring up. One is something that you brought up, Aman, in terms of, like, each of us have our place in this thing. Each of us has our place, and that's one of the things that I noticed in the book where, you know, bitter friends would tell her, "You don't have to go to the protests. Maybe that's not your thing that you need to do." And that's something that I think for the most part we're presently experiencing. We've been experiencing for some time now in real life in terms of like, the battle between that or the debate, I would say, about that, about who's doing what and then who is responsible for what and how exactly are you being helpful in this rise for equality, for growth and all of that stuff. And I think for the most part, I feel for the most part, we're getting better at understanding that. I don't know for sure because I'm not really in the front lines. And I mean, I, you know, I don't claim to be a revolutionary in any frame or way or whatever. I mean, I would shout about things, but you know, I, I'm not affiliated with any particular groups. But I feel in general that we're getting a better understanding that everyone's way of approaching this is necessary. So I don't know how do you all feel about that?
My quick thought on that is the idea that everybody has a role to play. To me, goes with the idea that it's hard to know what the right action is. If everybody's playing their own position, then there will be whatever the right thing is to do. There will be somebody there. Whatever in any given moment. In some moments you need different kinds of leadership, or not even leadership, different kinds of different kinds of leadership, followership, doing ship. You know, there are moments where it's like if the infrastructure of Asada had never existed and Bitter had just called vengeance through, then what that would have been terrible. But in some ways, if Bitter had never called vengeance through, then maybe Asada would just go on and on and on, losing comrades for who knows how long, you know? And so I think, yeah, that's what it is to me. Like, because we never know what is really going to be needed or what's going to be the right move at any given point. You need to be in the position that is right for you. And we need to do our best to respect and support every position that people are in. And in the book, these are all people that are committed to the idea that the current organization of Lucille is bad. But I feel like where we are, so often people actually want to blame people on the front lines. You know what I mean? Oh, well, if you had just been more calm, then people wouldn't have been mad and voted for the wrong. But. And uh, and so I think that's also the play your. It's interesting because in the context of this book, the play your position lesson is not everybody has to be on the front lines. But I feel like in America, the play your position is not everybody has to do what is like poll tested and approved by 50% plus one of America. Like there is a role for it. And there's a role for things that are completely outside of that system. There are roles for things that are completely outside of norms and rules and sometimes laws. Like civil disobedience is a real and I think probably necessary thing in this moment. That's what Dr. King didn't operate inside laws. That's why he was in jail so much. Um, and so that was kind of my takeaway, weirdly, and maybe it's just the circles I run in on social media. But I think we need as much the reminder that the position way out in the front is necessary and important. Because when the world changes, you will want somebody to have already been building the world that comes next. You don't want everybody to be responding only to the here and now.
Fully agree with what you just said, Chris, about why everyone needs a role and now why everyone plays their role needs to play their role. What I appreciated about this book, one, that it's a young adult book, and we're talking about that, because I have always felt and been raised in a way of like, I'm an activist, regardless of if I'm showing up at protests, regardless of if I want to be at times. Just being myself in spaces demands that of me. And when we talk about Sankofa, yeah, I was taught that, yeah, we're in this together. Um, and you are a part of this larger whole. Um, so I really appreciated that that was a major point of this novel. Um, and for me, this goes back to what I was talking about with finding hope right now. Um, for me, I found, uh, ironically, during this guy's first term, I found that the role that I was playing in the revolution wasn't my role. I was in nonprofit, and although I was decent at it, good at it, and felt like I was making real change, it wasn't what I was meant to do. And for me, that's art. So I am a full-time artist, but that did not come easy. That came with, like you said, Chris, I am in internet circles where it's if you're not out there giving your body, you're not doing anything. And that's not true. Um, and we see it uh, in a really big moment in this book where Bitter tries to fight against what she knows in her body to be true and tries to go to the protest, and physically cannot go. And what we see happens is she locks into what she is actually meant to do. And we have this whole beautiful scene. I think that was one of my favorite scenes in the book of Bitter putting on music and honing in on the pain and the anger and everything that honestly everyone that's on the front lines is feeling. Um, and she didn't even realize it, and was able to create art, because at the end of the day, we're talking about art coming to life. And she created art that was able to create this bigger, better world. So when Chris, you say, um, we do need people on the front lines and we need people that are beyond that and thinking past. For me, my immediate thought is artists. Um, Rest in all power to Nikki Giovanni. My immediate thought are people like Nikki Giovanni, these storytellers that are envisioning this world, and that my role in that is to be that storyteller and speak on the world that is currently so that we have record, and also to imagine and start those visions and build those worlds, because world building is done with a variety of tangible and intangible tools. And we see that here with the Asada kids and the Eucalyptus kids. And it's so dope that we get to see young people in revolution because that's what it's always been. Um, and yeah, the elders around them, like, yeah. So when you talk about freedom, uh, and the cost, yeah, freedom is always going to come at a cost, because unfortunately, in the nuances that we live, like it is not just handed to us, it was taken at a cost. Um, and yeah, I think that's just one of those things that it just is, Um, and that's just the nature of where we're at.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. Um, um, yeah, I totally agree, and I just think, for the most part, how you described, the book and how it deals with that issue in terms of, um, you know, dealing with the tension between the folks the between the Sada kids and Eucalyptus, particularly between Bitter and Eddie. Initially, it's just like, yeah, that's what we're experiencing, and it's so self-defeating in a sense because it's just kind of like that's what they want us to be like. They want us to be divided. They want us to be fighting amongst ourselves. And I don't know I don't know how well I d yeah, I wanna say it's getting better, but I feel like I don't know enough, I well, I know some things, but I don't know enough to know if these 2, um these 2 groups are still if we are both, like, accepting each other and understanding, like, we both have a place in this and we can't do it without any we have to do it with everybody. Everybody has to be involved. Um, so I don't know if there's understanding if we're there yet with that understanding. But yeah, but I'm glad that, that's shown in the book and it shows how it can be resolved. And it came from the Aloe himself who wanted to bridge that gap, who wanted to say, we can just work this out, where he brought Eddie and Bitter together and he was very firm. He was just like, no, you guys are going to talk this out. I can't live like this where you both are mortal enemies because I love both of you. And I want both of you in my world and I can't just kind of like cut, either one of you off. So yeah, so it took, Aloe and his naivete and I feel like, you know what? I want to say he's a healer, well, he is, he's did medicine. He was the medic. So he is definitely a healer, and it makes sense it would transcend into healing in terms of relationships as well. So yeah. Um yeah. Anyway, I went on a tangent again. Um so we're getting close to the end, and I wanted to make sure that I covered everything that seemed relevant to me. Well, not just to me, but just to you all. Was there anything else that you all felt we needed to just touch on and maybe wasn't touched on and you feel like needs to be recognized?
I would just speak real quickly to what you just talked about with how Aloe brought together Bitter and Eddie, and I loved how just in the structure of the book, um, the relationship reconciliation had to happen before the like world transformation things popping out of paintings. Yeah, that was a great reminder that mm, it all starts with how we treat each other, and yeah, any hope to build a better world also means we have to take the risk to interact with each other in a more vulnerable and more yeah, caring way.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, Chris. I definitely picked up on that in the book. And like you said, Nikki, how big community building was in this book, I think is something that we all need to take away. Um, and we started this talk talking about this, about hope. But one of my favorite quotes from the book, was Aloe speaking to Bitter. When Bitter's first kind of warming up to Aloe and they're getting into vulnerability. Um, and Bitter kind of sees hope as this very silly thing, and it gives like toxic positivity is how Bitter's viewing hope. And I think this is so relevant for us right now. Aloe says, hope is not a waste of time. Hope is a discipline. And this idea that like right now for all of us, it's like really important that hope is something that we're disciplined in, that we are actively looking for hope. And that we know that that isn't a waste of time. It's not this frilly thing. And hope can also be like really jagged and something that you have to like look for and get through the nitty gritty. So yeah, that was one of my biggest takeaways from this.
Yeah, no, seriously. I totally agree with you. And the thing is, it's just like when you realize that hope is it takes so much discipline. It takes so much practice to just have that. Then you realize that, yeah, it is a discipline. It is something that it's not something that you just say, oh yeah, hopefully, it's not, it's something that you have to really believe and actually put the work into. So yeah, I really appreciated that too as well. So okay, any final things to say? Yeah, so I really truly appreciate you guys. Like seriously, I really appreciate you. And you've given me hope today. You brought me joy today, honestly. And I appreciate that. As they say, joy is resistance. So we'll share links to Kavi Kanam in the notes for this show. Once again, Kavi Kanam is amazing. It actually cultivates and uplift BIPOC poets. So you need to check that out as well. Thank you so much to my guests. You all are amazing. And stay tuned for more. Thanks for listening to When We See Each Other. I'm your host, Nikkiesha McLeod. This show is produced and edited by Jeremiah McFay. If you like what you hear in this show, please rate and review it in Good Pods, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else that allows that. And please follow us wherever you happen to listen to podcasts. Doing so helps us to expand our audience and is much appreciated. You can find more information about this show at stereoactivemedia.com/whenweseeeachother. And you can get in touch with us at stereoactivemedia@gmail.com. Also, follow us on Instagram and TikTok under the handle WWSEO Pod. Talk to you later.
This podcast is produced by Stereoactive Media.